Gurur Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Today we will talk about and understand what is the real Hatha Yoga and what are the popular notions. Why I say that real? The moment we say real, it has to be authentic. And what is the authenticity? Authenticity is found by the different texts written since the origin of Hatha Yoga by our great masters. It is so simple to understand. If we want to learn physics and we remove the contribution, the teachings of Newton, Edison, Einstein, Archimedes, then we are not learning the real physics. So simple to understand. So it is not that I only teach the real Hatha Yoga or any type of yoga. It should be based on the knowledge passed on to us by a tradition. But if I say I will change my understanding of Einstein theory of relative, from there we have to start. And then, if we are really a scientist and we can find out, we can prove that how the Einstein theory of relativity is right or wrong. That is what happens in science, and that is how the science progresses. But there is a catch. My friends who are listening, you all are listening, so there is a catch in the knowledge of the science and the knowledge of Eastern wisdom that includes yoga, means Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, Mantra Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, etc., etc. There are 29 prefixes added before yoga. What is that catch? That catch is the yoga talks about absolute knowledge. Absolute knowledge cannot be changed. Science talks about the relative knowledge in the world outside, the phenomena of the world. So that catch makes it clear that the knowledge of yoga cannot be changed. It was relevant 10,000 years ago, or it is still relevant. We may change our expression. That's a different thing. But if we deviate from the principles, for example, Newton's law of gravitation, the moment you deviate, you're done with the physics. So it is important to understand from where the word yoga came. We may talk of Hatha Yoga later, because if we understand what yoga is, first time when it was discovered, then we can add an adjective Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga, Karma Yoga, etc. Take one example. Tell me, what is this watch meant for? Time. Do you see the time in the watch? No, I see it is 5 a.m. or 5 p.m., but as as such, I don't see the time. That is hidden. That is one thing. And second thing, we have a clock, wall clock, pendulum clock, table clock, table watch, smart watch, digital watch, analog watch. What else? You have a watch in smartphone. So every watch, whether you say watch, digital, analog, clock, wall clock, pendulum clock, table clock, one thing is common. It is the time. What is common in Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and a long list? I'm not talking of the styles of yoga. You see in the background, they are the original text, also of the Hatha Yoga in the Vedas and the Upanishads. So when we are talking of real Hatha Yoga, we are talking on the basis of these texts. Come back to the clock. Time is one thing that is common. What is that thing in is common in Hatha Yoga, Raj Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, etc., etc.? And the common thing in yoga is end of suffering in our life and awakening to real self. If I take a definition from Patanjali, Yogaschitta Vritti Nirodha. So we are looking at the result. We see tada drishtu swarupe avasthan. Result is we are settled in real self, we are awakening to the real self, we are awake. Or I can give an expression, we can give an expression that real self is self evident, self luminous, permanent peace, happiness. I can say, we can say real self is Satchidanand, the absolute existence, consciousness, and bliss. So, first thing that we can conclude when we say Raja Yoga, Raja means king. Kingly Yoga means that you can contemplate, reflect, and meditate. So, through meditation, you reach to yoga, the absolute existence, consciousness, bliss, or in a simple word, you can say directly through the practices of meditation, we can reach to permanent peace, happiness, and bring an end to the suffering. What about karma yoga? By action, we reach to the same goal. Mantra yoga, reach to the same goal, mantra by mantra. Jnana yoga, by knowledge, we reach to the same goal. By hatha, we reach to the same goal. So it is hatha yoga. That should be born, kept in mind. I give an example of a clock, time, clock, watch, and then you can add wall clock, and pendulum clock, and digital, analog, smartphone, you have a watch. So that main goal is the essence. So it means our understanding, our knowledge, we should focus on the knowledge that how hatha, raja, mantra, karma, jnana can help us reach to bring an end to the suffering and discover our real self. So, do we keep that knowledge of yoga in our mind while learning or teaching any schools of yoga? Make it very clear schools of yoga are different than the styles of yoga. I can create my own style, but the schools of yoga have been as old as 10,000 years ago. So, do we keep that knowledge of yoga while approaching many schools? Or we simply have our own opinion, our own understanding, like I may have my own understanding about Newton's law of gravitation, and then I'm out of physics, even though I'm learning physics, but then I have a popular notion, wrong notion. That is what is also known as a fake science. So we find yoga first in the Vedas. Vedas are known as the oldest text, where we find many references of yoga in all the four Vedas. And the knowledge part of the Vedas are the group of texts known as Upanishads. So the main knowledge is extracted. Those verses were extracted and it became a group of texts known as Upanishad. And in that Upanishad, aim is the self discovery. The goal of yoga is self discovery. So let us go a little deeper, step by step, find out the meaning of the yoga. As I told you, time is hidden in clock, pendulum, wall clock, and digital watch, and so on. So, what is that yoga? We are clear. So, when we study Patanjali Yoga, especially the first chapter, we find that yoga is samadhi. Yoga is the highest meditation or mindfulness. That that helps us to discover the real self. Where is the real self? I just told you. Absolute existence, consciousness, bliss. It is permanent peace, happiness, love, and wisdom. And so once we find that, we bring an end to the suffering. So all yoga has two elements in common: bringing an end to the suffering and awakening to inner peace and happiness. Now, how Hatha Yoga helps us to reach to that goal? How Raja Yoga? So here we are focused more on the Hatha Yoga. We'll go into it. Yajnavalka, Upanishad, Yopan Pran Yurikyam Swarajuretsostatha Surya Chandrama Suryogo Jivatma Paramatmano Evam Tu Dvandajalasya Sanyogo Yogityukto. If you take the last line, एवं तु द्वन्द्वजालस्य एवं तु द्वन्द्वजालस्य when we remove the network of delusion present in the mind by knowledge, we reach to. So there are many people also talk about this is one of the best definitions of, I would say, Hatha Yoga. Even though the great master Yajnavalkya never mentioned evam tu dvandajalasya sanyogo yogatyukto. So he said only yoga. So here we can say it is all about Hatha Yoga. So what he says, Yopana Prana Yurikyam, the union of prana and apana. Union of Yopan Prana Yurikyam, Swaraju, union of Shakti and Shiva. Yopan Prana Yurikyam, Swaraju Retsos Tatha, Surya Chandrama, and union of sun and the moon flows. Surya Chandrama Surya Yoga, Jivatma Paramatmano, and union of individual and the supreme consciousness is yoga. When you remove the delusion, the network of the delusion, what is that network of the delusion? That apana and prana, they are two. When they are known as one, individual and the supreme consciousness, they are two as it appears, but when we remove the ignorance, we reach to that. Why I refer to the Yajnavalkya? Because he started the Eightfold Path. Later on, Patanjali took over. Other master is Dattatreya, who also started the Eightfold Path, different from Patanjali. We normally say Ashtanga Yoga. And the master Shiva, who originated yoga. Even Krishna is also known as the originator of yoga. That we will take later, that why two great masters are known as the originators of yoga. Are they one or two? That's another point we will take up later. So just take an example, just take a fact that Shiva first taught yoga to Parvati, his wife. And then his wife taught yoga to seven great masters. Then started the Natha tradition. Natha is referred to as a Shiva. And who is the originator? Adinatha. So another name is given to the Shiva is Adinath. So one thing should be borne in mind, that the Shiva is the originator of yoga. And Shiva taught yoga. Here I'm not referring to Hatha Yoga. Yoga to his wife. His wife taught yoga to the seven great masters. And then started the Natha tradition. So why we name it as a Natha tradition? Natha is a Shiva. Adi means the first Natha, originate. And from there we get many limbs in schools of yoga, the Yajnavalkya, the Dattatreya, the Patanjali, and also we can say Shiva, lot of, and later on we find the Hatha Yoga Pradipika and the Ghirand Sanhita are the known as, and Shiv Sanhita, Shiv Padhati, are known as the authentic text of Hatha Yoga. We have yet to understand what is the meaning of the Hatha. So, but before that, let us understand the word Upanishad that gives us clarity. Upanishad, Upa means that you sit nearby the teacher to receive the knowledge with a qualified mind. You are a seeker with commitment. So, what happens when you sit near a teacher receiving the knowledge as a qualified seeker? Uh, First thing that happens that you the loosen the impact, or you minimize the impact of suffering in your life, in your personal, professional, social life. Second meaning, it leads us to awakening. And third is it destroys our suffering. So sitting nearby either guru or sitting nearby the knowledge. So here the simple meaning is that with that commitment I study, with a clarity I study, with a goal to bring an end to the suffering. Upanishad. So Shad has many meanings. Shad means movement, knowledge, it helps changing the life. By studying, Eastern wisdom will gradually end suffering. That is why in Upanishad we have a famous mantra, Sad. We have a famous mantra, Satu Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityur Ma Mritangama. Lead us from false to the truth. Lead us from ignorance to wisdom. Lead us from mortality to immortality. The So this meaning of the Shad gives us a deeper insight of yoga. Loosen sorrow, suffering, or minimize suffering, fear, insecurities, depending on the understanding, level of understanding, condition, events in our life. And to summarize that, whether the moment we use yoga, forget about the prefixes, hatha, raja, karma, jnana. The moment we use the word yoga, it has twofold in end of suffering and awakening to inner peace and happiness, or you can say awakening to real self. We realize the knowledge of the real self, whether it is Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga. Now come to, once that is clear, now we should go and understand the meaning of the word Hatha. Hatha is literally translated as force, compulsion, hatha, hatha, obstinacy is another literal word. But the Upanishad gives us a clarity, and even many texts of yoga. It says Hakarah Kirtitah Suryeshtrakaras Chandra Uchyate Surya Chandramasuri Yogo Hatha Yogo Nigadhate. So now Hatha is explained. Yoga we have already explained. Now Hatha is explained. Hakara Kirtitah Suryeshtrakaras Chandra Uchyate. Hatha, it has nothing to do with a compulsion, force, or obstinacy, but the word hatha consists of two syllables, hakara, hakara. So ha, sun flow. He talks about energy, and the master talks about moon energy. Sometimes we say prana in the mind. Again, I'm not going deeper in the very first master class. Otherwise, we will lose the essence of it. So, hakaro kirtita suryeshtrakaras chandra uchyate. Surya chandramasori yogo hat yogo nigadate. So, the entire, that universal energy or the force has two divisions. Hakara kirtita. So, hakara kirtita suryeshtakaras chandra uchyate. So when we unite sun and the moon flow, it becomes Hatha Yoga. So does this union take place in Raja Yoga? Yes, but our focus is on meditation. So here the union takes place by different practices like asanas, pranayama, pratyahara, mudras, etc. So again, union, understand? So union takes place because my mind lives in ignorance. What is that ignorance? The network of illusion, network of delusion. Oh, is that Hatha Yoga? Yes, that is Hatha Yoga. That is what is explained by every master. Not modern, not all the modern masters. We will come back to the popular notion also, so that we can remove the ignorance and we can find. Now come to the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, the most popular, and even the Ghiran design. And Siddhant Paddhati, Shiv Paddhati. So first thing to understand that Hatha Yoga Pradipika is written by a master, no doubt. But it is not a revealed text. Why it is not a revealed text? Many verses of Hatha Yoga Pradipika were taken from other authentic texts. And if we do not understand why these verses were taken, then we do not understand Hatha Yoga. So, first thing is very clear that the authors, so called, we can say modern authors, like of Swatmaram, Hatha Yoga Pradipika, Gherana Samhita, many verses were taken from the authentic text to justify that they follow the tradition. Now, in the very beginning of the text, Hatha Yoga Pradipika, the master says role of a guru. So the tradition, it confirms that the yoga tradition is always learned from a traditional discipline. I will talk about the guru also. The guru is a state of consciousness or the mind that helps us to move from ignorance to knowledge is the real guru. So, an outer guru is a representative of the knowledge of Eastern wisdom that removes the ignorance and helps us to settle in the knowledge of the real self. So, now see, when your focus is on the knowledge, you are a seeker. And then the traditional teacher points the seeker towards the knowledge by different practices or groups of practices. So one set of practices becomes the Hatha, so Hatha Yoga. Other group of practices becomes the Raja, so Raja Yoga. Third group of practices pertaining to the knowledge becomes Jnana Yoga. Fourth group of practices, Karma, Karma Yoga, Mantra Yoga, etc., etc. But the goal of all those practices is again twofold: bring an end to the suffering and awakening to the permanent peace, happiness, love, and wisdom. I'm picking up a simple principles and then we will explain in detail. Now we should understand this knowledge is realized in stages. No, I can understand easily, and you give me all the knowledge. We can understand at the intellectual level. Seed does not become a tree overnight. Seed does not become a tree overnight. You sow the seed, you nurture it, water it, put a fertilizer, and then leave it. Wait. So, knowledge that we understand in the intellect demands nurturing, constant repetition, daily practice, commitment, so that this knowledge from here it moves to the heart. The mind realizes by practice, it goes further down. That is why we say the knowledge is realized in stages. And it takes time. So we can say directly and clearly that when we use only the word yoga, means the yoga helps us to understand who am I, what is the world, and what is the supreme consciousness or existence. And then it tells us how to think, speak, and act in permanent peace, happiness, love, and wisdom. Indirectly, we can say how it brings an end to the suffering. Kleshas. Patanjali talks about avidya, smita, raga, dvesh, abhinivesha, pancha, klesha. All the five kleshas come to an end. So, if we do not study the knowledge from the original text and authentic text properly, then we build our false notion and opinion around a particular school of yoga. Then we claim we are greater than the tradition and great teachers of the tradition. Then we fall into ignorance, and that's how it creates a popular notion of yoga. And we have a many popular notion of Hatha Yoga. 26 posture, 2013 postures, advanced posture, advanced yoga. They are popular notions. They are okay. I'm not criticizing anyone. Everyone is right. We are only talking that how to find that real tradition from the teachings of the great masters whose texts are available, and it follows the tradition. So the masters emphasize stress on the knowledge from the text by a teacher. And the teacher is Guru because he gradually disappears and gives the importance to the knowledge. And the seeker has to understand that he has to receive the knowledge, follows by he has to retain that knowledge through contemplation and reflection. If he does not, then it doesn't work. We'll talk about in detail later.